do what we gotta do. No lecture today, right? Because we're done learning, hey, where's? Oh, there it is. Okay, what are the numbers that we need to do? Get the right page here. 7.8. Okay, 23. That's it. The other class had like 6, 7 questions up here. 19. 13. Well, now they're coming up. Okay, let's just do these then. All right. Gonna leave early for mochi-kun chicken. Okay, number 13. Y equals -3 sine -2x plus pi over 2. Okay, so the first thing you gotta do is whenever x has a coefficient on it, you need to factor it out. So if I factor out this -2, what's gonna be left? X minus pi over 4. Can you guys do that? Now on the test, I'm not gonna make you factor it out. I'm gonna write it like this on the test so you don't have to factor it out, because if you factor it wrong, then you kinda all screwed up already. Okay? So I will write it like this for you on the test, make it easier. So what we need to do, this is what you have to do. You have to graph this, right? Because you always got to do the stretching and shrinking first, okay? You graph this first, and then what does this do? It shifts it pi over 4 to the right. So just worry about doing this, which is like today's quiz, right? And then you just shift it pi over 4 to the right. Okay, now, how do you graph this? Remember I showed you yesterday, what's the identity for sine of negative theta? Here, let's write it under. What is sine of negative theta? Negative sine theta. So sine of -2x is actually equal to negative sine 2x. But this negative and that negative cancels out, and so all you end up with is 3 sine 2x. So you graph this, and then you shift it pi over 4 to the right. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so graph sine. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, -1. Sine looks like this. Right? What does this do to the graph? It multiplies the y coordinates by 3. And what does that do to the graph? That will multiply the x coordinates by 1/2. So if I multiply this by 1/2, the 2's cancel out, so you just get pi. So this is pi, half of that is pi over 2, half of that is pi over 4. So each hash mark is going to be pi over 4. So pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4. Okay, so that's what this graph looks like. That was like today's quiz, right? Now, all you have to do now is shift it pi over 4 to the right. So basically, everything will go 1 hash mark to the right. So that's all you have to do. So let's add 1 right there. So this point goes there, this point goes there, this point goes there. Everything gets shifted pi over 4 to the right. So now the graph looks like this then. And then copy and paste as needed, right? Because you have to graph. Did it say graph 2 periods? What did it say? Yeah, show at least 2 periods. So you guys know how to copy and paste. I'm not going to do that for you guys. You guys do that. Okay, so the key step is right here. You got, if x has a I don't know why the book writes it like this, but they do. They want you to factor it out. And then in this problem, you have to do an extra step, right? The sine of negative theta is negative sine theta. Next, number 19. Number 19, y equals 2. How come nobody's asking? Because In the class we did, what were those, there were two problems that like was ugly, you have to shift it left and right. Everybody did those okay? I think it was number 11 and 9. Everybody did those okay? Okay, I'll walk around the room now and check it. Can you do number 9? You want me to do number 9? Okay, 9 or 11, doesn't matter, because they both came out ugly, so we'll do that after this one. Okay, so the first thing you gotta do is you gotta factor out that 4. Okay? So if I factor out that 4, what's gonna be left? X minus... Come on, people, you gotta be able to factor. Pi over 4. Just remember, if you're unsure, oh, did I do it correctly? Remember, if I distribute the 4, this times this gotta equal that, and this times this gotta equal that. Is it? Yeah, so you know you did it right. Because factoring is the reverse of the distributive property. That's what it is. So this is what we need to do. We need to graph this. This is what we need to graph, right? Right? Without that thing in there. And then after I get that graph, then you shift it pi over 4 to the right. Okay, here we go. Woo-wee! Now, what is the period of tangent that I remember? I like this one. Now, you can remember any period you want. I like this one. And tangent goes upward, yeah, like this. So here's 1 and -1 there. Okay. So, what does this do to the graph? It multiplies the y coordinates by 2. So, 2. And then that will multiply the x coordinates by 1/4. So if I multiply this by 1/4, you get pi over 8. So this asymptotic is pi over 8, and this one is negative pi over 8. There you go, that's one period. Now what we need to do is shift it pi over 4 to the right. Now, how much is pi over 4? Well, if this is pi over 8, isn't pi over 4 going to be like 2 of these then? Pi over 4 is double pi over 8, right? So we need to shift everything 2 hash marks to the right. So here's pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and so forth. So what if I took everything and shifted it pi over 4 to the right? That means this asymptote is going to come here. This one goes over here. Everything shifts 2 hash marks. This point comes over there, and so the graph looks like this. Did anybody notice anything? It's the same thing, right? Because if you take this and shift it pi over 4 to the right, isn't that just the same graph? Right? Because that's the period. It's like that's it. So like you graph 2 periods right there. That's the answer. Right here. This is it. That's 2 periods. So by shifting it pi over 4 to the right, nothing, basically you just copied and pasted. That's what you did. Okay, let's go back to number 9. So if I do number 9 for you, then you should be able to do number 11 because it's the same thing except I think one is sine and one is cosine. So I think you can handle it. Y equals, but for those of you who actually did it, didn't it come out ugly? Okay, so the first thing we gotta do is we gotta factor out this pi right here. Okay, if I factor out a pi from this, what's gonna be left? X plus 2 over pi. Okay, so this is what we need to do. We need to graph this first, right? Forget the shifting, right? Just all the stretching and shrinking has to be done first. Graph this, and then you have to shift the graph, what? 2 over pi to the left, and then 5 down, okay? But worry about the stretching and shrinking first, okay? More chalk here. All right, here we go. Now some of you are going, I don't understand why it's going to be ugly. You'll see. Okay, so sine looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, -1, sine looks like this, yeah, like that, right? What does that do to the graph? It multiplies the y coordinates by 4, so whoop, 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 whoop. What would that do? That multiplies the x's by 1 over pi. So if I multiply that by 1 over pi, the pi's cancel out and you get 2. So here's 2, which means of course that's 1, which means of course this is 0.5, and that's 1.5. Okay, there we go. Now, we have to take this graph and shift it this much to the left and 5 down. Say, what, girlfriend? Like, what is this? Now, the other class, at least they punched it in on their calculator. 2 over pi came out to... But okay, what if you don't have a calculator? Well, first of all, I would never give you a number that ugly on the test. I'll make that like 1 or something. You know what I mean? But, okay, let's say you have no calculator. How do you figure out what 2 over pi is? Well, pi is about 3.14, right? Everybody knows that, right? Multiply top and bottom by 100, so you get 200 over 314, which reduces to, divide by 2, 100 over 157. But everybody knows 100 over 150 is 2/3, right? So is this number a little bit bigger than 2/3 or a little bit smaller than 2/3? Okay, look. So this is 2/3. What happens if you make the denominator bigger? Does the fraction get bigger or smaller? It gets smaller. So it's a little bit smaller than 2/3. Now 2/3 is 0.66666 repeating, yeah? So what's something smaller than that? A little bit smaller. That's too small. 0.6 something. Anyway, the other class did on the calculator came out to like 0.63, they said. 0.636 or something. Did anybody do it in this class? Johnson problem.
Oh, I just estimated with 2/3.
Yeah, but a little bit smaller. Let's just go with 0.6 then, okay? So, I need to shift everything 0.6 to the left. And like I said, I would never do that. This is just dumb. And then 5 down. Okay, so we're gonna need we need some more thingies here, yeah? So here's -0.5, and then so that's 8 and -8. So everything has to go 0.6 to the left and 5 down. Let's see if we can do this. So do you see this point? You go 0.6 to the left and 5 down. See that point? 0.6 to the left, 5 down. See this point? 0.6 to the left, 5 down. See that point? 0.6 to the left and 5 down. So this could be -9, yeah? And then this point, 0.6 to the left and 5 down. So now you connect the dots. There you go. That's one period, and then you just copy and paste. See, but if I knew it was going to come out this ugly, I wouldn't have assigned this problem. But I just thought the book would be nice, but I guess they're not nice. Okay, so on the real test, I would make this a 1 or a 0.5 or something like that. I'm going to make it 2 over pi. That's crazy! Okay, we just got one more to do then, which is number 23. 23, where is it? Nobody has any questions on 15 and 17? How come the other class had questions? This class, no questions. So you want me to do 15 or 17? Gonzaga? Since I see a blank sheet of paper there. Yeah, sure. Okay, there you go. You gotta learn to play the game! Okay, look, I'll do either 15 or 17. Which one do you want me to do, 15 or 17? Okay, I'll do 15. Okay, now, look. Anytime you have an equation and it says write a sine function, okay? This is what it looks like, okay? This is the general sine function, okay? This has to do with the horizontal stretching and shrinking, right? This has to do with, vertical. This has horizontal stretching and shrinking. This one shifts it left and right, and this one shifts it up and down, right? You always have to do the A and the B first, then you do the C and the D. Okay, but in this problem, what they want you to do is they want you to write the equation, a sine function that has the following properties. The amplitude is 2, the period is pi, and the phase shift is 1/2. Now, if you read the book, phase shift, see, a phase shift of 1/2 means you're going to shift the graph 1/2 to the right. That's what a phase shift is. If the phase shift is negative, then you shift it to the left. Okay, here we go. If the amplitude is 2, which number does that affect? Yeah, so right away, you already know A is 2 already, right? Oh boy. Now, if the period is pi, that affects this B here, right? Now, remember what I told you to remember? What is the period of a sine or a cosine function? 2 pi over b. Whereas for tangent and cotangent, the period is pi over b. If it's tangent and cotangent. But for sine and cosine, and of course if it's sine and cosine, then it's cosecant and secant. It's 2 pi over b. So if 2 pi over b is equal to the period, which is pi, can you figure out what b is? Yeah, you did that on your previous homework. So here, cross multiply. Pi b is equal to 2 pi. Divide both sides by pi. Yappa, 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 yappa. What is b? B is 2. So there you go. B is 2. And then this thing over here shifts the graph left and right. Well, if the phase shift is 1/2, that means the graph is shifted 1/2 to the right. How do you make a graph shift 1/2 to the right? What do you do? Yeah. Now, they don't have any up and down shifting, so it's like, that's not even there, so you don't even have to worry about it. There you go, see? Okay, now we do the last problem. I'm getting hungry. 23. Y equals negative cotangent 2x plus pi over 2. Okay, so again, like I told you, the first thing you need to do is you gotta factor out that 2 right there. If I factor out the 2, what's left? X plus pi over 4. Okay, so what graph do I need to draw? What is before I can shift it pi over 4 to the left? Y equals negative cotangent 2x. This is the graph that you need to draw first, just like today's quiz. And then all you have to do is shift it pi over 4 to the left. Okay, so here we go. What's one period of cotangent? Here's pi. This is the period I remember. I don't know what you guys do. Okay, and then does cotangent go up or does it go down? It goes down like that. Okay, but what does this do to the graph if it's negative? It reflects it over the x-axis, so actually this one is going this way. Kind of like a tangent graph, yeah? Not kind of, it is a tangent graph if you negate it. Okay, so this is a 1, so I don't have to do any horizontal stretching or shrinking, but what does that do to the graph? That will multiply the x's by 1 over 2. So if this gets multiplied by 1 over 2, that's pi over 2! Which means, of course, that's pi over 4. Now remember, this is the one that's going up is the graph. Now that I got that, you just shift everything pi over 4 to the left, which means I need another hash mark here. Here's negative pi over 4. So if everything goes pi over 4 to the left, that means this asymptote is over here. This asymptote comes over here, and then this graph is like over here now. There you go, and then copy and paste because you got a graph at least 2 periods. Huh? So was shifting left and right difficult? No. Only when you had to like figure out that was 0.6, but like I said, I'm not going to give you something like that on the test. All right, so we are done with the book for this chapter. Until the next chapter will be juicy. Okay, so here, tonight's homework, if you look on the thing, it says the practice test on the website. Here is the practice test. This is exactly what the See, I gotta do so much extra work for you guys. Especially on when I drew those graphs, because I have to like, you guys don't even know. Okay, so this is what the test is gonna look like. You're gonna have to graph 2 periods of the following. So basically, you gotta do everything to the graph. You gotta stretch it, shrink it vertically and horizontally, and then you gotta shift it left, right, up, and down. So you gotta do everything. Okay, so the test is gonna look exactly like this. You got one of each functions: cosine, sine, tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant. And then just like the book, I'm gonna give you a graph. You have to write the equation. Okay, but for this graph, you have to write a cosine function and a sine function. So this is like two problems right there. Because the sine function and a cosine function, they're exactly the same, except it's just shifted, right? And then same thing for the tangent. I give you the graph, you have to write a tangent function and a cotangent function. And same thing for this, the humps. You gotta write a secant and a cosecant function. Okay? So basically whatever I saw on my graphic calculator, I just captured the screen. And then 2 extra problems. I give you a cosecant function, you gotta tell me what the domain and range are. Basically, you're gonna draw the graph and then answer the question, yeah? And same thing here, what are all the asymptotes of this graph? Basically, if you just draw the graph, you can answer the question. So how many problems are there gonna be in this next test? Since I showed you everything? Oh, what did you guys do? Just look at that number. No! Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because I told you you're going to have 1 of each, right? That's 6 right there. This one is 2, 2, 2. How many is that so far? 12, and then 13, 14. There's 14 problems on the next test. So this is what I already told the class this. So I'm going to make it 5 points each, which is kind of, so what is 14 times 5? 70. I'll give you 33 points. So if you absolutely know nothing, you get 30. All right. How is that going to help you get a 30 out of 30%? It's going to, I don't think anybody's average is 30%. That means everybody's grade is going to drop drastically if you get 30. No, so you don't do that. So anyway, make sure you put things like that. And so, are we meeting tomorrow? Yes, we are. So tomorrow we will go over the practice test and we'll video it. And then look at the schedule. Where's the schedule? So where are we? We're up here. No homework weekend, right? So tomorrow's Friday. All we're gonna do is just go over the practice test, and that's it. Okay? No homework. So basically, I guess your Tuesday homework is study for the test. So make sure you can do the practice test. What happens if you can't do the practice test on your own? Come in. No, you come in for help. Otherwise, if that's the case, I'm not going to give practice tests anymore. Just study on your own. And then the test is on Wednesday. So I'm not going to even see you after tomorrow until Wednesday now. Unless you come in for help. Come in Tuesday. All right. Any questions then? Okay, let's go to lunch then. Let's get go chicken. Get in line now. Do not disrupt the other classes now.